to me, there's two different viewpoints of creation or existence, or however you want to look at it, right? And I think the first, let's see here, let's just here. The first one is science, right? And then the other view that people take is let's call it consciousness, religion, or just the universe, or nature, okay. Now, a lot of this is based philosophically, and this is uh, more seen as a scientifically proven way of viewing things, right? Um, Interesting enough, the science community explains our universe, and there's kind of a running joke or a running uh, saying that science can explain everything about our universe. They just need one miracle, right? Whereas over here we're relying on the implication is over here we're relying on miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle for our view of the universe or consciousness or God to create. We're looking for miracles left and right. Whereas science says, oh, we just need one miracle, and we can explain the rest mathematically. um, but if you think about it, and that one miracle, by the way, is a ball of mass, right? We just need that ball of mass. That's our one miracle, right? But really, there's more than one miracle. Okay, I can think of at least two other miracles that would have to go along with this. Number two would be gravity, right? Um, I mean, you say, "Oh, gravity's not a miracle; it's here." Explaining it, you can't explain it. Nobody knows why mass attracts mass, right? But we don't know the answer to that question, right? So it's a miracle to us. Another miracle is the space for all this to exist in, all the space, right? That's another miracle that science needs, just on the face, right, of everything. Um, I think there was one more that I had thought of. Uh, um, Gravity, space. Oh, well, I don't know if this really falls into that category, but I think I was going to say magnetism, but maybe I won't list that because that's not really. I don't know that really fits. But anyway, so science really needs a few different miracles to explain things, right? If you want to say, okay, their math is correct and all their observations are correct, right? And their extrapolation of all that information is correct. Or at least in the right direction. We at least have a general idea of things, right? Um, but I disagree, actually. I think science relies on more miracles than looking at things from a God point of view or a consciousness point of view, right? And this is the view we're going to take today. Surprise, surprise. Um, but I think it can be explained in a way that is self-evident. That maybe the model that we're looking at over here that is extrapolated from all this information that we've been collecting for the past few hundred years, but really 100 years, right? It's been right around 100 years since we discovered that we actually in a galaxy, right? For that, we didn't know we were in a galaxy. Right? We just thought the universe was full of stars. We had no idea what a galaxy was, right? So we're going to take a look at what if there is a God? What if there is just this consciousness? Now I consider, I'm going to start interchanging consciousness, nature, universe, everything is religion. Everything is just one thing. Okay, it's God. It's the belief in uh, a greater creation, some kind of something directing creation rather than some random events that you can prove mathematically, right? Um, and I'm going to say that over here, you really don't. You can look at this in a way where you're really not relying on miracles in the same way that this side is. Okay. Um, so let's talk about this. All right. So let's just say, okay, we've got nothing. How does this work? Right. Um, you know, the only thing that we know for sure exists is our thoughts, right? I mean, if you break it all down, the only thing that you can be 100% certain of is that you're thinking about this. Your thoughts are swirling, right? Now you say, "Oh, I'm sure I'm in a house and I'm sure it's cold outside and there's a foot of snow and I'm sure." Well, kind of. I mean, but if you take it to another level, the only thing you're absolutely certain of is that you're have this point of perspective right here, and you think and you're self-aware, right, of this thought. That's the only thing we know 100% certain. I mean, if you think about like the Matrix, right? For all we know, we're hooked up to these machines that feeding machines and taking the energy away that we create. Like the Matrix. The only thing that's for certain there is the thought, right? They know that they're thinking, they know that they're self-aware, but they just don't know. They've given them a different reality, right? We don't know what this reality is, right? All we know is that we are self-aware, that we are in a reality of some sort, right? So there's really only one thing that exists over here in the beginning, and that is thought, right? And before that, there's only the potential of thought, right? So you have a universe with really the potential of thought, but we know thought came because we think. So now there's this thought, right? And let's from now on call this thought God. It's easiest, right? 3 letters, God. Okay. It's easier than consciousness or nature or universe. We're going to call it God. Um, but you can look at it any way you want. Okay. It's not science, it's more philosophical. So now all we have is this thought. Well, what's thought going to do? Well, at this point, there's not much to think about. So, so I think the first thing thought wants to do is find something to think about. All right. But what I'm getting at is thought wants to create the universe, right? Thought thought wants to think about things, right? So it creates this universe to explore. Okay. So how does thought create the universe? Okay. How does this thought create this energy? We'll call it an energy because it really is an energy. So how does thought create the universe? Well, this is where I go into the process, I think, explains the model. Okay. So the first thing first thing God has to do is create 3D, right? Because there's not even 3D right now. There's nothing. Got nothing. Nothing. So thought needs to create 3D, right? 3D space, 3D something. So how does God create three-dimensional space? And that's why this is here. All right. Okay. So let's talk about how 3D is created. Okay. Just like as we know our three-dimensional space, how we define our three-dimensional space. Okay. In three-dimensional space, the first dimension that must exist before the other dimensions is a point, right? You need a starting point, right? So the first dimension is a point. Okay. The second dimension is a plane. Okay. Just like we know what a 2D plane is, right? So the second dimension is a plane. How do you verify that second dimension? How do you verify that you've created that second dimension? Okay. This is where we go into looking at a 3D cube over here. Okay. Now what I'm showing you here is something that's called orthographic projection. Okay. And this is important because I need to show you this in orthographic projection so that I can verify that I'm creating these dimensions for you, right? And I'll show you what I mean by that. It'll become clear, right? So an orthographic projection just means that, you know, you're looking straight onto this, right? You're looking straight onto that. You're looking straight onto that. You can't see what's behind this plane right here, right? Here's your side view, like this. You can't see what's past this plane, okay? And here's your top view. You can't see what's behind this plane because it's going back perfectly straight, okay? Here's the front view, here's your side view, and here's your top view, okay? Now, so when we go from the first dimension to the second dimension, let's say we start right here, and I apologize, I tried to work my way through this once or twice. Let's just say we're starting with a point here, okay? Now, do I create the second dimension by going from this point to this point? From here to here? From here to here? I do not. Because when I go from here to here, I still see a point in that view. I need to see a line in all of these views in order to verify I've created a plane. Otherwise, I'm still creating a point. Okay? So if I take that point and go up here, am I creating a plane? I am not. Because all I'm seeing is this point from here to here is a point in this view. So I've still only created a line. Okay? The only way to create a plane is to go across the corners, right? So now, did I create a plane when I went from here to here? Well, from here to here is a line up here. From here to here is a line here. No more points. We're in lines. We've got 3D. I'm sorry, we've got 2D, right? Because we went cross corners. I went from here to here, okay? Now I have a plane. I've created X and Y, right? Now, from here to here, we've created a triangle, right? Um, let's say to make everything easy, all of this is a unit of one. It doesn't matter. It's an inch, it's a foot, it's a meter, it's a mile, it's a kilometer. It doesn't matter. It's a unit of one. Okay, everything is going to take a look at it this as a unit of one. So we have one here, and we know from Pythagoras' theorem that this would be the square root of 2, right? Because a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Bear with me, I'm not good at lowercase, right? So we've gone from here to here to create our plane. Now we need to go into 3D. How are we going to create 3D? Well, we've got this plane here now that we've defined. How do we create the rest of this, right? We have to go from the plane to 3D. And the way you do that is going from corner to corner, okay? That's how you create 3D. That's when you create X, Y, and Z in every direction, right? Not just, you have to create, in order to verify that 3D has been created, you have to create X, Y, and Z, all three directions, okay? And the way you do that is taking this plane and going from corner to corner. So when you've done that, right, then you've created your 3D. And you create another triangle that goes from here to here to here, right? Here, like this, right? Okay, where we have that same unit of 1 here, and we have the square root of 2 down here, and now we need here, okay? Because these triangles represent what you're doing, right? These triangles represent how you got there, okay? You took this point and you had to go in X and Y to create Z. And when you went in X and Y, you're actually creating that hypotenuse because you're going in both of those directions, which is the square root of 2, okay? The same is true with the plane going to 3D, right? In all three of these views. And in order to have accomplished 3 dimensions, it has to be verified in all 3 views. That's how you get this. You verified it in all 3 views, okay? Now you're at 3D. It's all going to matter here in a second. I know it probably sounds pretty crazy. But one of the things I found was interesting about this is because 1 is the same thing as the square root of 1, right? Square root of 1 is 1. 1 squared is 1, right? The magic of number 1. So if we have this Pythagorean theorem, can we apply it here? And I think we can, because this squared and this squared equals this squared. And you say, well, so what? Well, you see what I see? 1 plus 2 equals 3. 1 plus 2 equals 3. What if I shifted? Now this is 3 dimensions. This is 3-dimensional spaces now created. 3-dimensional spaces created right here. We've just verified it. Now we know we're in a 4th dimension, right? We can't see the 4th dimension, but we can say to ourselves, if I've defined the first 3 dimensions this way, can I continue with that and define the 4th dimension in the same way? And that's difficult for us because we experience the 4th dimension as time, but it's really not. It's space. It's containment. Okay? Everything is contained by time. We are inside of time. We are inside the 4th dimension. We call it time. We see it as time. It's the 4th dimension. It's containment of the 3rd dimension. Just like the 3rd dimension contains the 2nd dimension, right? This contains an infinite amount of planes, at least 2. Well, actually, at least 3, right? Infinite amount of planes, just like time has an infinite amount of planes. We're 3D inside of time, an infinite amount of planes. Time can be a second, time can be a year. It's an infinite amount of planes divided up, just like 3D spaces, right? But you're experiencing time rather than viewing time, right? So it's difficult for us to see that. But if you were to go into time, you would create the next dimension forward, which would be 2 plus 3 equals 5, right? That's the triangle for time. And if you say the 5th dimension is the containment of that, right? Then you'll have 5th dimension containing time, which contains 3D, right? So you would have 3 plus 5 equals 8. So I'm sure you're already wise to the pattern here. It's the Fibonacci sequence. This is why we see Fibonacci in nature, right? Everybody always says, oh, Fibonacci sequence, yes. Nobody ever tells you why. Well, it's natural. Yeah, but why? The reason the Fibonacci is what you see, is the pattern that you see that is reflected so much in so many things in our physical world, is because you're adding depth to a plane. You're adding depth to a plane, right? You're adding depth to a plane. And all of these, you're adding depth to a plane. That's what you're doing, okay? So where do we want to go from here? Well, what do we have here? We have basically a point starting off here and going to here, right? So let's just make this a, like this, right? So it's going from here to here, okay? So let's do something here real quick. Say, well, let's just make this a line. You know where it is. You know it's going from here to here and not from here to there. It's going from here to there. You have some, make that a Z. I know it's hard. You need to see a Z. All right. So now you've basically got a line in space where God created 3D space by creating this line, went from corner to corner, right? Now, really, what you're probably seeing is it doesn't just go in one direction, 1, 1, 1. It goes in both directions, right? 1, right? So from the origin, right? So this whole thing can be a unit of one, or this can be a unit of one, and this is a unit of two. It doesn't matter. It's all a unit of one, right? So when God created the universe, he created basically this tear, okay? And we would see it as a tear, okay? And we're going to get into that a little bit later, what we're really seeing. But it's really a tear, but it's a tear with depth, okay? So if you take and look now, I challenge you to find yourself a really nice picture of a galaxy, a really good one, really high def. We can zoom into the very, very center of it. Here's what you see. That's what you see. You look deep enough, you'll see that tear. You'll see that's exactly what was created when three-dimensional space was created. That's the effect. Okay? Get really close and zoom into the very center of that. Where they tell you it's a black hole, it's a black hole, all right. So we have kind of, but we still have kind of this problem, like, so God created, how did God create space? Space is nothing. You've got nothing, you created nothing, right? What did we create here, right? We got the nothing of space and this nothing, we created nothing inside of nothing, right? Essentially, right? So how do we grapple with that philosophically? Well, pretty easy, actually. According to our perspective, our logic, it's impossible to have nothing inside of nothing. You wouldn't be able to describe, there's no sense in making a statement, right? If you say, I've created nothing inside of nothing, no, you didn't, that's impossible. One of them must be something to differentiate itself from the nothing, right? Philosophically, right? So now we have something. Obviously, we can see it with our eyes, but that's really our perspective. A lot of things we see and don't see, there's a lot of things that are nothing to us, but it's not nothing to the universe. Okay? We have a very unique perspective of this universe, and I'm going to get into that as well, because that's pretty important. We have a very unique perspective of the universe. And I'm going to explain that by talking about all the dimensions now. Okay? And this is in keeping what I used to do years and years ago. So what I'm going to say is we have three-dimensional space. And we're going to represent that as a sphere, because even though I showed you orthographically here how to look at X, Y, and Z, really X, Y, and Z being a unit of one completed is a sphere. Okay? You'd have a sphere. You'd have a radius of one, and you'd have a sphere. Okay? So there's three dimensions. Let's say it's the sun. Okay? The first three dimensions are our sun. It's a big hole inside of, it's going to be the galaxy. We're not there yet. The sun is just a big hole. It's a big hole. And inside this, where the sun is, is our solar system, right? Let's say we got all these planets in our solar system, right? So if the sun is 3 dimensions, the containment is 4 dimensions, and the containment of our solar system is the 5th dimension. That is the nothing that surrounds our solar system. Okay? That's the 5th dimension. The 6th dimension is what is containing all of that, which is multiple solars with multiple containments, all contained into one galaxy. So the 6th dimension is the galaxy. Okay? Containing our galaxies is all this nothingness, right? That's the 7th dimension, right? That's the containment of the galaxies. We'll call that the universe, right? And the 8th dimension, you are back to the point. And why are you at a point when you're at the universe? Because theoretically, if you have containment of all these galaxies, theoretically, you can move far enough away from that to see that as a point, just like you can move far enough away from a galaxy to see it as a point. You can move far enough from a star to see it just as a point. The same thing is true with the universe. Theoretically, you could be outside of it far enough to see it as a point if there were dimensions beyond that. But we don't know that there are any dimensions beyond that. Okay. The only way we're going to have the 9th and 10th dimensions. Oh, and let me finish something here real quick. What I think is very, very interesting is we see our universe in 8 dimensions. 7, really. Okay. 8 is a reverse, just like music. We hear music in octaves. We see our universe in an octave, right? And what's really interesting about this is in music, the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth have the perfect resonance inside that key with the root note, right? And just like our universe, the 4th and 5th dimensions are us, because we are inside this 4th dimension, but we are 5th dimensional thought. We are 5th dimensional energy, right? Why are we 5th dimensional energy? Well, everyone says, I'm 3D. Are you? What's 3D? 3D at its most basic form is an atom. We see 3D because we see a bunch of atoms clumped together for whatever reason. But 3D is really just an atom. You're not just an atom, okay? You're a collection of atoms. You're not 3D. You're a collection of 3D held together by some kind of energy. The strong force of an atom, the skin, the hair, whatever. You're being held together. All of those atoms are being held together by some energy. You are that energy. You're not the atom. And you are that energy contained inside this time, because you have perspective of 3D. I have perspective of 3D, right? I'm outside of 3D. I am outside of 3D. These thoughts, believe it or not, if you really, really think about it, your thoughts are outside of 3D. It's an energy. It's synapse firing. It's an energy. It's not 3D. You might say, oh, well, this is a chemical thing, and that's okay. What's causing the chemical to do that? You are a collection of 3D being held together and directed by an energy force of some kind. Okay? And I think that's the beauty of it, isn't it? I mean, we are fifth dimensional energy inside of the fourth dimension, which is time. We're inside of a planar time, right? So we jumped in here. This is planar, okay? Time can be a second, time can be an hour, time, it doesn't matter. It's planar. Just like this is a million planes, this could be 2 planes, or this could be a billion planes, right? The same with time. Time can be 2 planes, or it can be a billion planes, right? And that time's not going anywhere. It's not destroyed. Okay. So let me talk about why we're energy real quick. What is energy, right? There's a bunch of different forms of energy, but one of the main forms that you'll learn about is electromagnetic, right? In other words, when you take a wire and pass it through, as this is a magnet, right? And let's say this is a wire, okay? When you take this wire and pass it through, the wire is conductive. Let's say this is a piece of copper wire, okay? When you take this copper wire and pass it through that flux of the magnet, the flux of the magnet, the electrons in this copper wire get excited and move directionally, all right? Depending on which direction you're taking this through the flux. So when energy goes through here, it creates a magnetic flux. When this goes through the magnetic flux, energy is created through the conductor. Okay. Now, if you say that we have a solar plane, really, when you step back and view, let's go ahead and take this out. It's not that hard to remember. When you have a solar plane, here's the sun, here's the planet. I mean, you go far enough away, you're basically seeing a plane, right? So you're seeing a two-dimensional plane here, right? So when you see a two-dimensional plane, you have to have forces holding that plane together, or else it wouldn't be a plane, right? So when you go to this plane and into this plane, you'll see that the plane has depth. Someone added depth to that plane. And there's a sun and planets. And, yeah, God did it, or nature, or whatever you want to call it. Depth was added to that plane. But the depth that was added to that plane faces resistance. Everything does. Otherwise, when the depth that was added to that plane, according to Newton's laws, it would have expanded indefinitely, instantly, if there were no opposite force holding this 2D plane going into 3D, right? That force on top of our solar system is magnetism, okay? Magnetism is the result of our 2D plane being given depth for our consciousness to come in and experience it. right? When there's magnetism inside this plane that we've added depth to, we, as conductors, are traveling through this, acid reflux. We're traveling through the solar system and we're conductive. Everything about us is conductive, right? That's why you get shocked if electricity bolts through you, because you're conductive, right? And when we pass through this polarity that is our solar system, as we pass through the planes of time, we're breaking that flux, right? We're going through that flux as conductors, and it's the energy for our consciousness. So we're fifth dimensional. Here's the fifth dimension, right? It contains the fourth dimension. When you open this up and created depth in that plane, you created 3D and you created 4D. We are contained by time, okay? In other words, we have this containment that we don't understand. There is nothing outside of time. It's beyond our comprehension. There is nothing outside of time, okay, according to our perspective and the way we understand the universe, okay? But really, the fifth dimension is outside of time. Fifth dimension contains time. The seventh dimension is also a containment of the galaxies, right? So the seventh dimension is kind of like our fifth dimension, where the polarity caused by the seventh dimension, might be a way to draw this actually. We're going to call this the galactic plane opens, solar plane opens. This is the seventh dimension opening up. So there's probably a seventh dimension consciousness in our universe. And then on top of that, I believe there's a God. Okay. So where we go here? Let's see, what else have we talked about yet? I think there's really one more really important thing to discuss about this theory. Well, this model, right? It's not really a theory, it's just a model. Because I used ruh-roh. Well, I think I may have already just ended this because I used the wrong marker here. I knew it was dangerous to use that marker on the paper. I should have taken that thing and thrown it across the room when I was done with it. All of it? Oh no, so I used the one here. That's going to be a problem. Anyway. Something I found very, very, very interesting. I think is very, very important. I just thought of something that I have to talk about first. I apologize. I kind of explained this, but I didn't. So in the beginning, when I was saying God created a 3D nothing inside of nothing, right? Then I said to look at a galaxy, right? That's true. But you're not looking at the first, second, and third dimension when you look at a galaxy. you're looking at the seventh and sixth dimension. When you go into the galaxy, you'll see the fifth, fourth, and third dimensions, right? That's when you'll see the first three dimensions. So the first three dimensions are the same as the forming of the galaxies, but you don't see it the same because you're experiencing time differently, right? So actually, the sun is the first three dimensions, right? 3D. Now the when I kind of skipped because I went to the first three dimensions and then showed you a galaxy. Well, that's still true. The galaxy was created the same way as the sun, as the solar system. Solar system is just a galaxy inside of a galaxy, right? Or a solar system inside of a solar system. They're they're the same thing. The difference is how we view it in time. Okay. Um, if you say the sun is 3D and the atoms, all the sun and the atoms in our solar system is the 3D, right? Those are the 3D particles. We have one master 3D particle. We've got other planets and moons that are pretty master 3D, and I believe that there are large vacuums inside of the planets. Basically, it's a whole. Okay, I believe our sun is a 3D whole. Okay, we see it as the sun because of our perspective, because of what we are. But the reason we see it as a sun and not the same as a galaxy spiral is because inside of this there's no time. So there's no time inside the sun, right? In other words, I mean, I don't know how thick the sun is, but somewhere in the sun there's a core, like a black hole or something like that you would call, okay? Somewhere in the sun, okay? And inside of that, there's no time, okay? It's the first, second, and third dimension. There's no time. You don't get time until you get outside of 3D. That's why we see it as a sphere. We'll see it as a sphere. And, the fission or fusion or whatever it's doing. I mean, I know what they say it's doing, but whatever's going on there is the result of a whole, of nothing and nothing. Whatever it is, philosophically, it's nothing inside of nothing. And that's why we see it as something with our perspective. The galaxy is a different time scale. We're seeing that through, right? So when you see a galaxy, right, and you're looking at it, and you're seeing that galaxy hit the time, you're seeing the time that's containing that galaxy, right? You're seeing all that time. You're not seeing any time inside of the sun. That's why they look different. But they're created the same way, right? It's a hole inside of nothing, right? Maybe some kind of a fractal. I don't know if I like that way to describe it, but so I wanted to explain that as well, because that's kind of, if you were really paying attention and you noticed that I said, first, second, third dimensions, and then I showed you how to see that through a galaxy spiral, and then turn around and tell you that the galaxy is the sixth dimension, right? But there's a reason for that. There's actually some logic behind that, and it's time, because time galaxies have their own time surrounding them. We've got a time inside that time. Okay. Um, oh, back to something that's really important. Here's our sun. then, oh, there's the, okay, so here's our sun, here's Jupiter, here's Saturn, here's Uranus, and here's Neptune way out there. Now, here's the rock planets. Now, I've spent a lot of time studying planets, and I would just sit for hours and gaze at the charts showing you their distance, their diameter, their mass, their speeds, their velocities, their size, their diameters, their distance from the sun, all of these things. I would just sit and ponder this stuff for hours and try to draw correlations with numbers and things like that. And one of the first things I noticed right away was that if you take the distance that Jupiter is from the sun and set that at a unit of 1, you would have a similar distance, and actually exact, and I'm going to tell you why, even though you're not going to see that when you look at a chart. And then if you go out to Uranus here, you would have 2. And then out to Neptune, you would have 2 again. Now, if you look at a chart, you say, oh, well, no, this is 995, and this is and the numbers look low. They're not exact. But what you're not taking into account is these are all elliptical, okay? The distance that you see on a chart is the average distance from the sun, okay? If you take the min and max and the min and max and the min and max and the min and max of all of those, you will find an integer that you can say this is 1, this is 1, this is 2, and this is 2. You can find this distance. It's not the exact same distance you'll see on a chart from Jupiter, but it's within the orbit distance of Jupiter's min and max. Okay? So I think, wow. That's interesting. And I think we always get thrown off by this fact because it's so plain to see, but we don't see it. And why do we see it? Well, because the Earth is the most important thing. The Earth is the most important distance from the sun, right? The Earth. The Earth isn't going to tell you about the model that we need to use for our solar system, okay? At the very least, you have to look at these gas giants, right? And then, you think to yourself, well, wait a minute. If we have 4 gas giants inside our solar system that are basically integers away from each other, what you have is a frequency. You have a wave. You absolutely have a wave going on here, right? What did oh God, I knew I'd forget his name when I was doing it. What did Tesla say? If you want to understand the universe, think in terms of frequency. This is a frequency. It's a wave. It's an integer. Okay. So I started looking at this. I'm like, wow, that's pretty remarkable that it's not thought of this way. There's no relevance given to this whatsoever. And to me, I find that strange. I think that's got to be relevant. It has to be relevant. And then you look at the composition of the sun, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, and their compositions are similar. So these gas giants are similar. And I'm looking at all these and the hydrogen and the oxygen, and I'm looking at the percentages, and I'm looking at all this stuff, and I'm like, there's got to be something to all this, right? And then you start looking at how the gas giants are really mini solar systems, right? You know, but it's remarkable that each one of these gas giants kind of represents its own little solar system, right? With a bunch of moons going around it and heat coming off of it that they're not quite sure how to explain. Um, so I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, but what if someday this we get a different sun, and this one is called, I don't know, make something up. What's our solar system? S prime, right? What if this becomes one, and then this gets everything gets pushed out? What if our solar system cycles? What if there's a frequency? What if there's a pulse on a time scale that we don't really comprehend? Interestingly enough, um, Greek mythology, I believe, Neptune was the father of Uranus, Uranus was the father of Saturn, Saturn was the father of Jupiter. In other words, Jupiter was the son of Saturn, right? Also, in Mayan, in ancient Mayan culture, they believed that the sun went through four different rebirths, and the sun we have now is the fifth. It's the fifth sun. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's going to be another rebirth. So I think the implications of this is very interesting. I don't think I don't think that our science community is open-minded enough. I think we need to take a harder look at things. And if we really don't know something, admit we really don't know it, and allow for crazy information to come in and at least be considered. Because you never know where the truth's going to come from, right? Um, there's a ton more of this stuff. I don't know how much more I want to get into because I'm getting kind of exhausted. My brain's starting to get but there's all kinds of stuff about this about the what does this say? If this is true, doesn't that kind of give us the answer of why there's aliens, even though science says there's just no possible way there could be aliens because we're too far from the nearest star that could have it, and we know there's no other life here in our. Well, if this used to be a sun, and this used to be a sun, and one of those planets used to be an Earth-like, or one of those moons used to be an Earth-like planet, then we would have very, very ancient aliens inside this solar system. And personally, I don't believe they interfere with us. I don't believe they want anything to do with us. I don't think we were created by aliens. I believe there's undoubtedly more than I believe without a doubt there are aliens, but I don't believe they interfere with us. And I think we're just scrambling to learn about them, and they're just sitting back laughing. Well, you do your own thing, dude. We ain't helping you. You know. because we have to survive this ourselves. We can't. We're not going to be given. It's just like like they say, don't feed a wild animal, right? You're not going to. The aliens are going to come and give us all this technology so that we can live better. Why? So we can kill each other more. I mean, would you give our society more technology? I sure as hell wouldn't. But it's just like, are you gonna are you gonna let a brain surgeon pass his? Are you gonna help a brain surgeon pass his all of his exams going through school? No. You know, we're not going to get any. Don't. We're not. We got to create this ourselves. But there's tons of videos where we could talk about that human consciousness. I mean, I could do 3 or 4 hours on that, and coming back and forth, the pyramids, all this stuff. There's just a ton of stuff. If there's enough interest in this, I'll continue to make videos. But quite frankly, if I'm happy with this video after it's done, I don't know if I'll be making any more unless there's a lot of interest generated. Because all I needed to do was get this out. This was my burden. I had to get it out. I had to do a video. I had to put a cap on all of this. I took a bunch of my videos down. I haven't done a video for many years. It's not because I don't think about this stuff. If anything, I think about it more than I ever did. But I just don't know how much it matters to humans. I don't know. I personally think that it's extremely important to understand all this. I personally think it's very important to understand this model on a certain level. But on an everyday life level, there's no reason for it. I think there are some very long-term effects to understanding this model as a species. We should probably be aware of. But I don't know when that is and how far off that is. But I think I'm gonna end it there for now. And if you guys want to talk, we can talk way more about consciousness, how we come from the fifth dimension, how we sometimes get back. You know, uh, like I said before, the pyramids, all the other pyramids, ancient civilizations, and things like that. There's a lot of stuff to discuss about that. And to be honest with you, I wanted to do a Bible because I believe that this theory actually, or this model actually, is described well in the Bible in the first book of the Bible. If you go through Genesis, and I've written about this. I never did a video explaining. Maybe I'll do a video. But I mean, if you look at a lot of what the Bible says about creation, I think it's described very well. I think it's very poetic. I think it's beautifully described. For those people that say, "Oh, it doesn't make any sense. God did it in one day," and this. Well, look, I mean, if you're looking for the Bible to show you E equals MC squared, I mean, I don't know what to tell you, dude. I mean, for me, the Bible, when I read Genesis, I think this is one person thousands of years ago being shown somehow a visual of how the universe was created, and that's what they wrote down. I think it was pretty well done. I think a lot of the way it's explained, and a lot of people use that as ammunition against it being something we should consider. I view it completely the opposite. I think it's described very poetically, very beautifully, the creation of the universe and our solar system and everything. People get hung up on too many. Religious people get hung up on this. Science people get hung up on this. Everyone's got a hill to die on, but whatever. But we could talk about a lot more of this stuff. There's a ton of this stuff to talk about. But this is very interesting. I'd like to connect this with the Mayan Lawn calendar as well. Maybe, I don't know. I'd like to look into that. But anyway, that's it. We're going to call it a day. We got a ton of editing to do. Thanks for watching. If you got any questions, ask them. I'll answer them.